what I think a lot of people in the Bitcoin space is that as the markets start to crash, that opposition to new technology is generally driven by fear. Like, most people don't understand fiat currency. Most people didn't understand cars when they were going to destroy the horse industry. And sadly, like looking at the election results from this year, and I'm sure most people in Bitcoin would have experienced similar motivators, whether or not it's sufficient to prompt them to get politically active. I'll just give you two examples where if it's your money spent on yourself, natural human psychology encourages you to spend the least amount and get the highest value. I'm hopeful that whatever does happen, whether it's financial or liberty-based incursions by government, will have a greater degree of pushback by the general community next time.
Okay, right. Welcome everyone to tonight's Edge21 and Surf Coast Bitcoin livestream Q&A. I'm Lachie, founder of Edge21 and organizer of the Surf Coast Bitcoin meetup. This is all about exploring Bitcoin, sovereignty, and how we can build a better future from the ground up with signal, not noise. This conversation is being recorded and will be published later on the Edge21 YouTube channel. So feel free to sit back, listen in, and we'll open up for questions at the end. I'm excited to welcome our guest tonight, Paul Barker, a Libertarian Party candidate for the Federal Seat of Corangamite, and one of the few political voices in Australia who genuinely understands and supports what Bitcoin represents. Paul is a passionate advocate for individual freedom, self-custody, and economic sovereignty. He's played a role in shaping the Libertarian Party's 2025 Bitcoin policy white paper, and his campaign is helping to push these ideas into the public conversation. Notably, the Libertarian Party is also the first Australian political party to officially accept Bitcoin donations, putting their principles into action. So let's dig into the future of Bitcoin in Australian politics. So Paul, thanks for joining. Yeah, absolutely. So I thought to start with, for those who don't know you, can you maybe tell us a bit about your background and how you ended up advocating both libertarian principles and Bitcoin?
I'll be as brief as I can. Grew up in Melbourne and Adelaide, joined the Air Force when I was 17, did some overseas and domestic operations as a part of that. Left there, was a forklift driver, truck driver, run my own transport company for a while, driven over 2 million kilometres in trucks around Australia, become a skydive instructor, moved to Torquay. I've taken over 3,000 people for tandem skydives between Melbourne, Torquay and a few other places around the country. I got in, don't like this harm being caused to the majority of people, but it's going to mean that those with Bitcoin are going to be incredibly wealthy. Like back in, I think it was 2015, 2016, something like that, $20 Australian worth of Bitcoin then is worth $5,000 now. So
Incredible.
It's insane.
Yeah. And if we compare the prices of things too, going back then as well, right? I mean, things were so much cheaper in dollar terms.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's sort of where I come from professionally and politically. And yeah, I'm just super keen to see Bitcoin treated just like a currency, because that's what it is. Like, anyone that understands money understands that, like, money is not the woe of the world. Money is simply a means of transfer of value. And Bitcoin is just another method of that that's actually way safer than the fiat currency that most Australians are compelled to use.
Yeah. You're probably familiar with the phrase, money is the root of all evil. And I sort of grew up thinking that. And of course, also, money doesn't grow on trees. And those two, phrases kind of just ring in my mind, because the first one, money is the root of all evil. Well, I did sort of grow up thinking that money was a bad thing, but, I didn't know why it was a bad thing. And it's not until, probably literally within the last 10 years, and also reading the Bitcoin Standard, which really started to open my eyes as to what money was, and how money inherently is not bad, but, a bad money is bad, right? Like fiat currencies.
Absolutely. Like, I was publicly talking about the recession coming like probably 18 months before it hit. So whether you look at it as a like legit straightforward recession or per capita recession, all you had to do is look at the money supply. And one, like, I despise inflation. Like, both Labor and Liberal have got policies that support inflation of 2 to 3%, which is basically taking $2 to $3 out of grandma's $100 stash out of her bed every single year until she's got nothing. But then if you look at the money supply, which is the primary driver of inflation, that money supply through COVID just shot through the roof. Like, we're talking like 4 or 5 times the typical supply level.
Yep.
And the fact that we haven't seen consumer prices explode by 4 or 5 times just show that either we are going to get hit by a massive amount of inflation in a short time, or we're going to see this sustained sort of 5-7% fluctuations for decades to come.
Yeah. 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 And then all sorts of price fixing,
Yeah.
you know, and accusations too. I see the accusations in the media with, you know, bloody Elbow saying things like, you know, there's price gouging going on with supermarkets. And I mean, they're basically just trying to blame everyone else for the problems they've caused, right?
Yeah.
You know, but and then the other comment that I mentioned, money doesn't grow on trees, right? I grew up thinking that, you know, because I'd want something and my parents would say, well, money doesn't grow on trees. And, you know, I didn't come from a wealthy family. We were a very, you know, average middle class. And so I didn't always get what I wanted. But then, you know, as I understood how the money system worked, for some people, money does grow on trees, and that's the government's, right?
Yeah. The magic money tree. Modern monetary theory.
They've got it. Yeah. MMT. That's right. You know. But anyway, I just wanted to touch back on your background and story there too, because that's pretty amazing. I mean, you've obviously done a lot of skydives, so
yes,
that's incredible. Ever had any issues there, or has it all been pretty good?
I've used the emergency parachute 4 times.
Wow.
All slow malfunction. So you've got high speed malfunction and low speed malfunction. High speed, the parachute has released, but the parachute hasn't come, or the parachute hasn't operated correctly. And the parachute's contained within its bag. So the strings might be out, but the bag that contains the parachute is there. But my malfunctions have been slow, like low speed malfunctions where the parachute has come out, but it's not quite right. And yeah, they're the typical hairy things, but the atypical hairy thing that's actually a little bit fun is there's a thing called crew, canopy relative work, where we deliberately put the parachutes together, and had one of my friends do it a little bit incorrectly and ended up with his parachute over my head. So I was a little bit suffocated for a very short moment.
Wow. Jeez. Okay. So
and that leads me into my motorcycling background, where I've transported over 5,000 motorcycles around the country, raced motorcycles, crashed them, snapped them in half. Like, I've won one motorcycle race, but I've ridden all around Australia and that.
Oh, incredible! Right. So that's separate to your trucking career, is it, or?
Yeah. So my business was transporting motorcycles. So I did a little bit of racing through that and through another employer. But yeah, it's all melded from, I think my first crazy thing was riding motorcycles, then it was racing, then it was skydiving, then it was politics.
Yeah.
I'll give you a similar but different high.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, all very challenging, and full of, I guess, lots of risk, lots of ups and downs. It all relates to Bitcoin and that as well, I guess, too.
Yes.
And of course, politics, and then Bitcoin. Some of the, I mean, Bitcoin is probably, as a new technology or movement, it's one of the most challenging topics of all. There's something I've dived into, in the past around new technologies and things like the telescope, or like the microscope, and all sorts of groundbreaking technologies that have changed humanity for the better. But of course, when they first come out, they're so challenging to the status quo that, there are so many people against it. And, it's very
Oh yeah.
clear that Bitcoin is one of those too.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin probably even more so because when it comes to money, money really is like one half of every single transaction in the world, right? In whatever form it is. So money particularly is going to be a real tough one, a real challenge.
Yeah, because what you mentioned, that opposition to new technology is generally driven by fear. Like, most people don't understand fiat currency. Most people didn't understand cars when they were going to destroy the horse industry, and all these things. So me as a libertarian, I'm fully aware that advocating for ideas that aren't understood is incredibly challenging, and Bitcoin naturally falls into that space where, if people don't understand what money is and you're bringing in something different, that lack of understanding and fear is going to be super, super strong. But then those that do
Yeah.
understand the car or the mobile telephone or Bitcoin and adopt it early, like, you all know the bell curve, the early adopters, the middle ground, and the late. By being that early adopter, you take on some of the risk, but also a lot of the rewards. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we recently did some research on the adoption rate of Bitcoin, and actually, what's most interesting is that, and we compared it to like mobile phones and internet, and Bitcoin is actually growing a little bit slower to those. But I think but nevertheless, it's still growing.
Yes.
But I think that it makes sense because, like I said before, when it comes to money, this is something that really touches everyone in a different way, and it's a part of everything. Whereas, you look at something like the mobile phone or the internet, that was kind of like something that you could just hop on. You didn't have to part with your existing system, right?
Mm.
Whereas, when it comes to Bitcoin, it's absolutely growing and growing fast, but just not quite as fast as those other
Yeah.
technologies. But I think that's naturally what we would see. And yeah, I might release that at some point too, because just to sort of get some comments from the sort of Bitcoin crowd, because I haven't sort of heard that before. But what else? Oh yeah, and obviously you mentioned Julian Assange. Yeah, I did actually. I saw him in 2012. I think it was 2012. I was in
Yep.
London, and he came out on the balcony of the which embassy was it? He was
Ecuadorian embassy.
yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he came out and he gave a speech, and I was actually there in the crowd, and
Oh,
that was a
wow.
real, yeah, it was a real moment for me. Yeah, because I had been following him for some time, and
Mm.
I still, I was still waking up at that point, really, but I knew there was something about him and what he was doing that seemed right, like in
Yeah.
terms of free speech, that, and of course he's, pretty out there guy, and I always found him fascinating, and obviously because he's an Aussie as well, it's definitely someone who I was very interested in. But obviously the fact that well, I don't know if they still have a lot of Bitcoin, but they did have a lot of Bitcoin. The WikiLeaks,
Oh,
given that in
yes.
the early days, yeah, they started accepting the Bitcoin, and there's quite a bit of history there to do with Satoshi as well. I'm not sure if you're aware of that history there, but he was around when WikiLeaks did start accepting the Bitcoin, and Satoshi Nakamoto was actually kind of against it because he thought it was maybe a bit too early for Bitcoin to come into the spotlight.
Oh, like maybe some of the defensive structures weren't quite set up.
Yeah, I think he felt like it needed a bit more time before it went that mainstream.
Yeah.
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 So yeah. So
But it's that synergy, and that's why I find that, um, the world is quite divided. So as social media has connected us, it's also divided us into quite tribal groups. But I think what is going to unite a lot of people is that shared desire for freedom. And that's where your WikiLeaks and Bitcoin and a whole host of other elements of society are going to realize that the benefits of individual autonomy over a centralized control. And when we start to cooperate through whatever form, whether it's markets or political or anything else, I think that's when you're going to see the freedom revolution. And sadly, like looking at the election results from this year, I think that it's going to get much worse before that critical mass of people are ready to turn around and call for individual liberty.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. I do want to ask you a little bit about that a bit later, particularly about how it went recently and your thoughts. But before we do that, I just wanted to sort of cover off your Bitcoin past as well. So, well, tell me, when did you get into the or join the Libertarian or the Lib Dems as they were called? But how long have you been involved?
So that was 2014. So I've just clicked over probably 11 years this year.
Wow.
Um, and I often get asked, like, how can you be a political candidate or elected representative? Like, I'm just average everyday dude. Like, left school at year 11, failed year 10 English, got into the military, did some pretty straightforward jobs as a result of that. I've never been high flying corporate type or whatnot. I've employed some people, run a few different businesses. Nothing to write home about. But all it is finding that team to work with, whether it's as an independent or political party or whatever, and then nominating, campaigning, and then getting elected. And then if you do get elected, then biting off more than you can chew and just chew and do as much as you can.
Yeah, because I guess you need to maintain a day job at the same time. Is that right?
Yeah, so on the Surf Coast Council, I get paid a bit over 30 grand a year for 15, maybe 20 hours of work a week. And obviously, no one can live off 30 grand a year.
No.
So I'm a truck driver outside of that. I have had different businesses over the years and obviously been a skydive instructor. That was one method of unreliable income. Like, you could make $1,000 in a day, you might make $10 all week. Yeah, so as a truck driver, whatever the weather is doing, I'm on the road making some money.
Yeah, right. Probably a great time for you to do some learning, like when you're in the truck, get some, I don't know, audiobooks, podcasts, whatever.
Yes. At first started, I think that's where it first started. So being on the highway, I'd be listening to country ABC, listening to Parliament, and the immaturity that just got me frustrated. And I think that was a key component where there was some visiting dignitaries from another country and the speaker was calling them to order. They kept to order for like maybe 5 minutes and then descended into the debauchery that they normally do. And I'm just like, these are supposed to be our leaders. So yeah, I've had a number of different inputs to motivate me to get involved in politics. And I'm sure most people in Bitcoin would have experienced similar motivators. Whether or not it's sufficient to prompt them to get politically active is another thing. And I'm not here to push anyone to get involved, but the reality is that if you're not politically active, it's very difficult to change society. Like, you can do your own thing and just sort of chip away on the edges. But yeah, I've chosen to get involved heavily, put my head above the parapet and get verbally shot at, because I think that's the best way to prompt societal wide change.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that is the organized approach that we have for society, isn't it? It's through politics, and I guess the challenge is getting heard, right, and making that impact. But I guess it's probably, do you see it like as a slow burn? Where it's sort of,
Absolutely.
yeah, like a
So I've been able to be
domino
elected.
effect.
Yeah, so I've been able to get elected to council, and I've had some friends with similar ideas join me in the 2020 council elections, and I see that's a good way to sort of grow the libertarian movement. We do have elected representatives in New South Wales and Victoria parliaments. We have had a senator for New South Wales in the federal parliament. That was David Leinhelm. But yeah, there really is a slow burn, because I think it's going to be potentially decades worth of education, and as we slowly educate different cohorts, like whether it's through Bitcoin or homeschooling or a whole bunch of different other areas, we'll probably get solid influence in maybe the next 10 to 20 years. But it all comes back to what I highlighted before: how much pain do people need to go through before they stop voting for the status quo?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And just to cover off your Bitcoin journey, was there a Bitcoin moment for you? And sort of how long have you been? Would you consider
Yeah.
yourself maybe?
So
Yeah.
so that was where I refer to the about the 2015. That was where I was paid $20 worth of Bitcoin then.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Right. So I think when you said $20, that was literally
Yeah.
that's how you
I
feel.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anyone else that was an early adopter would have seen similar astronomical growth. But it's just sort of continued. Like, I'm by no means like super deep into it, because as a political participant, I need to be across a range of different topics, from like taxes and regulation and a whole bunch of different areas. But I've been involved enough to see that the potential, and the things like El Salvador adopting it, and a whole bunch of other countries like I think Japan and a few others have started to take it on board in different ways. Not wholly libertarian, but it's good to see that some are sort of adopting, like whether it's a acceptance or a taxable income or different bits and pieces like that. Australia's really got a solid opportunity to be a leader in this space, but I don't think we will be, because of the Labor Liberal paradigm that we've got.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. I totally get that feeling myself. I think one of the most exciting things that you brought to my attention not too long ago was the fact that that Libertarian Party had released this Bitcoin policy,
Oh yeah,
and I know
massive.
that
Yeah.
and like just to cover like some of the key proposals I pulled out from the white paper, which everyone should go to the Libertarian Party website and download it and
Yes.
read about it. They've got a Bitcoin page and everything, which is and it's a great website too, by the way.
Cheers.
Covers things like a strategic Bitcoin reserve, capital
Yes.
gains tax and GST reform, legal recognition as currency, right to self
Self
custody,
custody. Yeah.
and yep, and most interestingly, support for privacy preserving tech, as in CoinJoin.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, what are the sort of key proposals you're most excited about, or what are you most excited about this policy?
Yeah. Well, we can touch on those elements that you raised. So the strategic Bitcoin reserve, we probably aren't going to do it, but if we, as a country, through our federal government, did develop a Bitcoin reserve, we just insulate ourselves so much from like global risks, where like whether it's impacts to trade or whatnot, like as we've seen with global manufacturing centered around China, if there's any sort of trade issues there and we need to find other partners, and we've got a internationally recognized Bitcoin as method of trade, will just be very well protected. And it's sort of like keeping all your eggs in one basket. If you rely on fiat currency, you're going to be stuffed in the long run. And it's just about being forward looking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I mean, you look at the Aussie dollar, right, versus the US dollar. It's just been like that for years, right? I mean, the Aussie dollar's been losing value constantly over time.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, and yeah, and also, don't you think it makes so much bloody sense, right? I mean, why why is international trade, done in these various different fiat currencies, and of course, the shiny, yellow metal, being gold, and But, you know, like, it just makes so much sense. I mean, Bitcoin is the first real global currency, right? I mean, of course, many don't see it as a currency yet, but there's no doubt that it will become one, I think.
Yeah.
It makes so much
It's much
sense,
easier
right?
to trade than chunks of gold.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, it's much fairer, right? Because I mean, fiat currencies, I mean, you don't know how much another country is, debasing their currency, for example. And I mean, relying on the US dollar, I mean, how do you know what's going on behind the scenes and how much value it's losing? And these values go up and down. I mean, you have to, yeah, I don't think anyone can truly understand what's going on with the fiat currencies market or with the FX. And you can't rely on it, right?
Yeah, no, it's so you talk about the global nature of it. I think, like, I don't like globalism, but I do support the voluntary interaction between consenting adults. And if someone in Zimbabwe wants to trade with someone in Greenland and they've got a universal method that's trusted, I think we're going to see much greater trade where, like at the moment, like as you highlighted, the debasing of various currencies, I think you'll see more trade because there's more trust.
Yep. Well, you don't need the trust really, do you, when it comes to the money?
Yeah.
When it comes to exchange, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, and look, it's the first true global currency that you can't stop for one. And I guess it's got to be. It won't be long before it becomes the most recognizable currency. I think probably US dollar, is easily the most recognizable currency globally. And of course, there'd be some, fiat currencies that nobody's ever heard of too. But it's quite amazing when you think about it that not everyone will accept it right now, but they can. It's,
Yes.
load a wallet on your phone and you can. But yeah, and that the comment you make about consenting adults, that's sort of like, I mean, that's like a libertarian kind of view, isn't it? It's where it's like you can make your own decisions as an adult, right?
Absolutely. And the thing is that we as libertarians, like there's plenty of libertarians that won't have Bitcoin and probably never will, but they'll support and advocate for its use in trade because they see that even though they don't personally like it themselves, they can accept that other people value it, and will want to use it. So, like, we don't need to be religious to support freedom of religion. We don't need to be a working taxpayer to support reduced income tax. Yeah, so that's where, like, some people I think get a little bit confused because it's like, oh, you just want total anarchy. And while the true definition of anarchy is no rulers, which is excellent in my view, it's more about meeting people where they're at, and what concerns they've had, and supporting their right to live their life the way they choose.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely, yeah, believe in that myself. As long as you're not harming someone else,
Bingo.
then we should be. Yep, yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. And yeah, just going back to that policy, I mean, really amazing to see. Like, yeah, obviously we touched on the strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Yes.
As you know, the US has kind of set one up. It's more of a stockpile. Do you think that maybe Australia might look at that and go, yeah, maybe we should think about doing something like this, or then probably wait another 5-10 years and get the price they deserve?
um, I hold high hopes for humanity. I do not hold high hopes for the Australian federal government, whether it's red or blue. Yeah, we should adopt it as soon as possible. But I think that comes back to that fear element and the fact that, like, we've got two major political parties that have policies that support inflation. Like, that is not a solid base to be able to understand Bitcoin.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And then the other thing I wanted to point out was, okay, well, self custody, right? I mean, what makes you? Why do you think self custody and privacy would be so critical from a policy point of view?
Well, it all sort of stems around back to the voluntary interaction between consenting adults.
Mm.
People should be able to like handle and store how they see fit. So whether it's just treating Bitcoin as a legitimate currency, as we talked about before, like the CGT and the GST, just the fact that it's being treated like a like an asset when it is a currency, just it's not fair. And
Yeah.
as someone who advocates for liberty, it comes down to a fundamental right that like individuals should be able to store and manage their Bitcoin free from government. Like it's the same as cash. Like government doesn't. Well, government does interfere and get into your wallet and steal it through inflation. But like we've got an inflation-proof currency, we should be able to empower individuals to manage it themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course, they control us through the taxes, right? Because I guess if we're using Bitcoin as a currency, then technically we're supposed to pay tax on that, right? Capital gains tax, or we're
Yeah,
supposed to report it every time, right?
which is a joke. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
But
that's
the
it.
thing is, yeah,
That's the puppet masters, right? Pulling their strings, making sure that we can't use this currency.
yes, yeah. So
Yeah.
I've got a little phrase that I adopted from our former Senator David Leinhelm, that government has got an addiction to opium. Now, on the outset, you're like, why have they got an addiction to drugs? But no, they've got an addiction to opium, OPM, other people's money, in
Oh
whatever
yeah.
form. So, like whether it's these talks about inheritance taxes, death taxes, like our party, along with the Australian Taxpayer Alliance, about 5 years ago, commissioned a study to look at all the hidden taxes, regulatory costs, and whatnot. And we found that the average Aussie, the average Victorian on $68,000 a year at the time was paying nearly 51% of their gross income in taxes. So it's just
Yeah.
like, and that's only getting worse and worse.
Yep. 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 So half your time and effort is going to the government.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many taxes, right? Or everywhere, and that's what you're doing. You're including all those taxes, that even the hidden taxes and everything.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't understand the fuel excise tax that's supposed to go back and fix the roads only goes to consolidated revenue, and some of it trickles back out to the roads. But that fuel excise tax, which is indexed, so it continues to grow, means that at the moment, because there's the cost of fuel, and then the excise is placed on top of that, and then the GST is placed on top of the excise, we end up paying about 56 cents per litre purely in excise and GST.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why when
Incredible.
the Liberals were talking about halving the fuel excise for 12 months, I think it's terrible policy because it's just a vote buying policy. But it does highlight how unjust it is. Like, if they can get rid of half of it for 12 months, why not all of it forever?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess you mentioned, OPM, or like opium as a drug. I mean, I guess probably these taxes are like a drug to the government, right? Because once they
Oh,
start them, I mean,
absolutely.
they can't stop them.
Yeah, because like to try and wean them off requires massive cuts to government spending. And I just don't think our current political leaders have got the courage to actually do that. Because, like, I don't know if you've seen the stats, but Australia is the world leader for amount of people per population that derive their income from the government, whether it's welfare, contractors, directly paid employees, where we were around about 100 per 1,000, but that's grown to nearly 150 per 1,000, and that's like world leaders. So there's one thing Australia is good at: government workers, which are paid by taxpayers. So I often give the example of people in the cart getting pulled and people out the cart doing the pulling. As time goes on, we've got less people pulling the cart, jumping into the cart from net taxpayers to net tax receivers. And that means that the people doing the pulling are having the workload increased and losing the amount of workers doing that. So, like, those mum and dad businesses paying exorbitant taxes, keeping everything afloat, I've got huge amounts of respect for. And the reality is that, like, there's too many cushy government jobs. And once you get one, it's very hard to be fired from them.
Yep.
And they just really don't deliver value, because I don't know if you're familiar with Milton Friedman.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to bring this up because you mentioned
Yeah.
other people's money, so I thought you might. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, there's 4 ways money can be spent: your money, someone else's money, on yourself, or on others. So I'll just give you 2 examples where, if it's your money spent on yourself, natural human psychology encourages you to spend the least amount and get the highest value. That's just standard practice. Like, if you're an average human, that is going to be the motivating drivers. Where if it's someone else's money spent on someone else, you don't have that same consideration to minimize the total spend, and there's insufficient motivation to ensure that you get the maximum value for that spend. And that's where taxpayer money being spent by politicians or bureaucrats on government projects comes into play, because there's just too much of it flowing around, and you can't have the appropriate level of transparency and accountability when you're talking about millions or billions of dollars, because just the detail that you need to go down to make sure every line item is being well spent just takes up too much time. Like, you look at the cost of the Australian government to run the Australian government now, just for like wages and all the rest. You're looking at about $600 billion. I can guarantee you that there is not one federal politician that could tell you where all of that $600 billion is going.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just incredible, isn't it? I mean, you're talking about you're spending other people's money on other people. I guess, I imagine, I mean, the person who's doing that is not really getting much benefit from it, right? Because it's not helping them. It's just, I mean, it's just becomes part of their job. So
Yeah.
that, you know, they're going to give it the least amount of time possible. Just pass on the money. Just do what they
Yeah.
need to do. You know,
Yeah.
just to get on. with their-
There's
yeah.
a 1% variation, which means it's going to cost an extra $1.5 million. It's all right.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. They're big nut. Yeah. Yeah. It's I think that is the inherent problem with governments, right? And I mean, how do we change that? Is that something that comes into your policies, or, you know, the
Yeah.
ideals of? Yep.
Yeah, so going back to the voluntary interaction between consenting adults, we've got a project happening in the Surf Coast at the moment that a pool is being built. And initially it was going to be a $20 million 50 metre pool. It's ended up a $50 million 25 metre pool, because just like the cost to manufacture and construct is increasing. The regulatory environment means that XYZ needs to be signed off in order to be a contractor to deliver a tier 1 project. You need to have all these elements connected, and often there'll be like a union connection or something like that that increases costs there. So you make the pool of potential contractors smaller, which means there's less competition, which results in higher prices. And because there's commitments of federal funds, you end up with a taxpayer from Mount Isa funding the pool in Torquay that they're never going to use, let alone see. And when you expand that into the thousands upon thousands of projects that are happening around the country, whenever there's federal funds committed, whether it's roads or anything, you've got these externalities being created where you and I, through our taxes, are funding projects all around the country that we'll never see a benefit from. Whereas if we got to a stage where libertarian governments were running things, those projects, in terms of land use approvals, we could do that. I'd personally rather all land be private, because then you've got greater accountability for that land. That the funding of it would need to be voluntarily driven. So whether it's corporates that want naming rights on the building, or the construction company is discounting their work to have some advertising, or whether it's the local contractors all just banding together and like, this is our proposal, and then going out to the local community to fund it, that would both develop the cheapest building costs and apply the funding from those who value it the most.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's the motivation that's needed, right? And the value.
Yeah. Because the thing, like, I hear from the council officers, whenever there's funding on XYZ, they talk about it being valued. And of course it's being valued. Like, if you're a sports player and you're getting a $3 million investment for a field or a stand or something like that, you are going to value that very highly. That my personal issue is that, like, I value a motorcycle road racing circuit. Should I be lobbying the government so that you, Lachie, pay for my raceway so I can go have some fun? I don't think that's fair.
No.
And that's sort of like talking about the policy, and whether it's self-custody or removing the CGT or GST from Bitcoin transactions, it all comes down to fairness. And for me, fair is ensuring that those who pay do so voluntarily.
Yeah, absolutely. I just see there's a comment there in the chat from David. He said, who was it who said that government is only good for three things: stealing your money, killing people, and taking away your freedoms? So
I don't know who that is, but it sounds like they're on the money.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of like, I guess, funding and donation. So, all right, so you're now officially accepting Bitcoin, the Libertarian Party, which is a first in Australia.
Bingo. And no one can take that away from us.
That's it. And how has that been received? Has any donations been received, for example, or
none as yet? But I think that's going to take a bit of time because of the transparency requirements around donations to political parties. I think in time we might see some small donations that fall below the disclosure threshold. But that the fact that we've got it set up means that we are well positioned to be leaders in this space, because other political parties might talk about it, but the fact that we've gone through and worked with the Bitcoin community to develop a system that works with the Bitcoin community, I think it speaks volumes, not only just with the Bitcoin community, but also with the regulatory framework that we're working with the AEC to make sure that, so if we do XYZ, does that tick this? And now the fact that we've got all parties happy, I'm pretty excited for what's going to happen over the next 10 years.
Yeah, yeah. Did you get? I mean, when that was announced, was there much, feedback from the community, or w-
Not a
did you hear
huge
much?
amount.
Or
So Tyler
Mm.
Green and Jordan Ditloff were at Bitcoin Alive to make that announcement. I wasn't there myself, so I don't know what the response to that was. But I think it's going to be one of those slow burn things that, one, as people learn about the Bitcoin options and join the Bitcoin space, in time they'll learn about the libertarian position on Bitcoin, then the rest of our policies, then the ability to donate. So yeah, I think we're going to see some good things in the future, just
Yeah,
not right now.
absolutely. Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, and of course, you get the most Bitcoiners who sort of don't want to part with their Bitcoin, unless, of course, they already live on a Bitcoin standard, because then it absolutely makes sense to donate in Bitcoin.
Yes,
But but yeah, it's no, it's an incredible thing, and I also love the fact that you're doing it based on the ideals of the Libertarian Party. It's not like it's because it's the cool thing to do, which I
yes,
would expect that like I guess Trump's party, for example, the Republicans, for example, they seem to sort of jump on Bitcoin because it seemed like, well, there was a movement there, and there's a lot of they could have got they get a lot of voters, which
yeah,
I get, that's jumping on the bandwagon, not because they think it's a great thing for the world, but just because they're going to get voters. And,
yes,
I guess that's probably going to happen, right? And that's probably how a lot of politics works. So, but the fact that you guys are doing it because of your values, that's what makes it, yeah, extra special. So,
absolutely. Yeah, because
yeah,
as I said before, like being a principle based party, it means that we are going to miss out on those populist things like that. I'll go back to that liberal fuel excise policy. The fact that they put it up and in the fine print was like for 12 months. It's just a vote grab. It's not a structural change to the taxation environment that delivers long term benefit to people. It's just, here, vote for us. We'll 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 take your vote that you'll end up paying back a few bucks in taxes when they get over 4% then put the money back in their coffers for the next election. We are doing it because we see that tax is morally wrong, and we seek to minimise it everywhere we can.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and of course you ran recently in Corangamite, and yeah, how did yeah, I know you mentioned it before that it's like most people in Australia seem to be happy with socialism.
Yes.
Um, so what's your feeling on how the last election went, how it went for you, and how do you feel the response has been?
Uh, my result was less than what I achieved in 2022, but we had nearly 20 years of operation under the name Liberal Democrats. In 2022, during lockdowns, the Liberal federal government decided they'd pass a law to make the name Liberal Democrats illegal. So by 2023, we
That's right.
changed our name to Libertarian Party. And that is going to set us on a long term trajectory of like, this is who we are, this is what we're about, there's no name confusion. So while I took a bit of a dip in first preference votes this time, I think in the future that'll just continue to build as more people understand what libertarian is and how it applies to their life.
Yeah, yeah. A couple more comments from David. I know he said, if the taxpayers received fair value for the resources we sell overseas, we would all be much better off. Yeah, absolutely. And I know David said he and his wife voted for you. So,
Oh, lovely.
uh, and what else he said? Mark Twain said that if voting made any difference, they'd never let you do it. How can we overhaul the political system so that it serves the majority rather than the parasitic few at the top?
Yeah. Well, I think I do take, I do disagree with that Mark Twain quote. It's not the system of voting that's the issue. The key issue is that the majority of voters have been influenced to think that Labor is for the worker, Liberal is for the business, when in actual fact, Labor is for Labor, Liberal is for Liberal, and voting can have an impact. Like what I've found in council, I ran in 2020 on my own, got elected. I was the only one to not bang on about the climate emergency, and that is partly why some people voted for me, because I was economic rationalist. I then built a team up of like-minded libertarian, conservative independents and liberal people to run together on a unified back to basics ticket, and that got 3 out of 4 elected. Had we taken 8 candidates to the election, we might have got 5 or 6, and had we got those 5 or 6 elected, we would have been able to turn the tide within the Surf Coast like that. That change is probably going to come in 2028, so watch this space. And if we can make that change at a council level and fix the roads, make sure the bins are done well, and get those basic functions of government completed to a high standard, treat people equally and all the rest, and then that is the test case that people can then see, oh, it actually works. How about we try it at a state level? And then if we can get a number of people elected on a state level and we see some positive change there, then in time people will probably go, oh, we're going to give you a go at federal. So that's why I'm thinking, like, this is going to be a decades-long journey. And like the story goes with people that live out in the forests, pushing down a tree to create a future bridge for people that they will never meet. I want to create a more free future for people that I will never meet, but I know that I've laid the foundation that even though I won't see it myself, I know that it'll be there for others.
Yeah.
Ideally, I'd like to see it in my lifetime, but I know I'm not going to see libertarian utopia within my life.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's incredible of you. Yeah, to, I guess, act in that way. And I guess what you're saying is it, like, all these small decisions and actions, can add up, right? And especially if they start pulling together, as you're suggesting, and it sounds like you're not planning to stop, right? You're going full speed.
I've made commitments to a number of people that I'll keep doing this until I'm 70 years old. I'm 42 now, so I'm looking at political retirement in 28 years.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm sure there's a lot you can achieve in that time. Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome to hear. So yeah, I mean, things can start. Obviously, I mean, as Bitcoin started, right? It's a grassroots movement. It started with just a few people.
Yep.
And I guess that's what you're saying, right? So within the Surf Coast, it's like a grassroots movement that can start to, as you grow and get supporters and people helping, then you can actually make these changes.
Yep.
But it does require votes.
Yeah, but it both requires votes and volunteers to spread the message of whatever the political thing is, like whether it's 420 Day advocating for the legalization of cannabis, whether it's a free speech rally, because the government is imposing a law that requires anyone under 16 to not be allowed access, which means that everyone's going to need digital ID, which we're opposed like stronger than anything.
Yep, great.
Yeah, we need boots on the ground to do so much. So whether people can donate or contribute time, every little bit helps a lot. Like votes are handy. but we need more people to help spread the message so we can get more votes to have more influence.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a flywheel, and obviously getting the message out there, yeah, is always going to help. So, well, what advice would you give to, say, because I know a lot of Bitcoiners out there, they probably feel a bit, can I say, like politically homeless, right?
Yes.
Or maybe they, don't believe in it. But what sort of advice could you give to, say, Bitcoiners who feel politically homeless?
I obviously, I'm coming with a high degree of bias. I would suggest that they sign up as a member to the Libertarian Party, because we are the only principle-based political party that is going to advocate for protections on government intrusion into their Bitcoin. But we can't do it alone. So whether it's membership fees or individual donations separate to that, whether they want to volunteer and hand out flyers, it's going to be a long slog. Like, I've been doing this political stuff for over 10 years. I've had some wins, I've had some losses, but looking at from like a military attack point of view, everyone is going to suffer attrition. And the conflict here is between government control and financial liberty. Bitcoin is a strong part of that financial liberty. And if you're not willing to accept some losses, whether it's some time donated or some money or Bitcoin contributed, it's going to end up in a situation where government control wins the battle. And I don't want that for anyone in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you say, is there a bit of a path forward to get Bitcoiners and maybe liberty-minded voters more organized? Like, is there a path forward for that?
Yeah, I think so. So attending the Bitcoin events is one way that we can ensure that our message gets through to those active in the space. But I think it's going to be a two-pronged journey where we as a political party engage more with the Bitcoin community, and it's going to require those within the Bitcoin community to get more engaged with us. So however that works out, the better the connection, the better the end result. Because like, we had an outside chance to get a senator elected as a libertarian in this federal election. That missed out. But if, say, in the future, we could get 3 senators and maybe 1 lower house representative in federal parliament, that means that even though we don't form government, we can potentially be what's called the balance of power, where if government wants to get X legislation through, we might have some amendments to make on that to make it more acceptable for us. We might vote against it. We might vote for it. But when it comes to getting their support for our policies, especially if it's in a minority government, like, let's say the Liberal Party were able to win 65 seats and they need another 6 seats to form government, and we have that one MP in the lower house that forms part of that crossbench support, suddenly, even though we're not the government, we can potentially get our policies implemented, because we're like, you want this, we want that, come to the party. And that's when what some people see is an unachievable aim from a minor party having influence, we can actually develop and deliver policy without the need for having 71 seats in Parliament.
Yeah, right. It gives you leverage.
Yes, huge leverage.
Yeah, yeah,
And
okay.
if you look at the stats, every single election, more and more people are switching off the major parties. And I find it a little bit disappointing that a lot will vote for like a single issue party like legalised cannabis, where it's a popular topic, But then where do they stand on other things? And for us, we stand 100% committed to liberty, whether it's
Mm.
the grandma's knitting club, Bitcoiners, or recreational cannabis users, or business being free from excessive taxes. Like, I think we stand to be in a really good spot for the evolution of a freedom-minded community into the future.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I did look at the voting form, obviously, this time round, and I saw the cannabis party, which I actually wasn't aware of. And I don't know, there was a lot of parties on there, and I mean, do you think these additional parties, they kind of dilute things, especially for the minority parties, right? Probably
Uh,
make it harder.
yes and no. On the surface, it seems as though it dilutes the opposition vote. But if people understand the way preference voting works, which most people don't, a lot of people will vote, this is my preferred minor party, I'm going to vote for them, and then I'm going to vote Labor, or then I'm going to vote Liberals. But the way preferential voting works best is if you are totally dissatisfied with the status quo, you can put all the minor parties in whatever order that you choose, and then put the majors last.
Yep,
And if
I
enough
did
people
that.
do that, then you might get Libertarian, you might get Greens, you might get someone else. But the reality is that there's huge power if you know how to use it well. And a colleague of ours in the libertarian space by the name of Topher Field has done a marbles video. So if you search Topher Field marbles, you'll see a really good explanation on how preferential voting works and
Yeah,
how it's much better than first past the post, where the US have first past the post. So if you, as a Republican, get 35% and the Democrat gets, say, 30%, but the, so what's that, 30, 65, but then someone else gets 55%, you might end up with those preferences flowing in such a way that someone from the outside ends up getting elected because they just get those boosts. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's been around for a while, right? That video, I think.
Yeah, so he did
Yeah.
one about 4 years ago, and he did an
Yeah.
update for this current federal election to
Oh, okay,
try
cool.
and streamline it and cut it down. Because
Yeah,
there's different
yeah,
ways. Like, so there's the upper house vote, the big white paper, and then there's the lower house vote, the little green paper. The the strategy is the same, but how you go about it has different methods for each piece of paper.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely was. I did watch that 4 years ago. That was a great video, but I'm going to check out the updated one.
Yes.
But yeah, it's it's incredible that we sort of need these explainer videos, right? Just to because I mean, it's not user friendly, right? You know,
Not at
you've got
all.
to, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And the
yeah,
reality is that because the taxes and regulations are so high and complex, people's lifestyles are getting harder and they've got less time to invest in
yeah,
learning about politics. And because we've got a curriculum now that doesn't support civics or politics in the broad general education, we've got parents that don't understand how the voting system works, raising children that aren't getting that educational support that used to happen at schools. And it's going to take a lot of work to turn that around.
yeah. Is that by design?
Who knows? I think you might be onto something.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, same with money and the money system. I mean, yeah, well, at least that was definitely not taught when I was around, and I know our kids are not taught about it because they, to be honest, they're pretty clueless to it. But I mean, I try to teach them about Bitcoin, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's not exactly the thing they're most interested in right now, especially teenagers. But
Yeah.
um, There was a couple of more comments in the chat. David, he said, I fear that the folk that control the fiat money system and media, etc., won't lose control of government. Is there a roundabout way that the ordinary people can gain control? And I guess Bitcoin is sort of one of those, but
Yeah.
any other
Yeah,
ideas?
so for financial independence, obviously Bitcoin, or go out metal detecting, that might deliver some results, but I think buying Bitcoin will be a better long-term strategy. Obviously with my political thing, like getting politically active and working in that space will help out. But a lot of it comes down to individual resilience. So having a veggie patch, having chickens for eggs, having a independent water supply, whether it's a water tank or whatever else you got set up. That I think, so Bitcoin is obviously the financial wealth that's going to be the level of protection to engage in the economy. But if you've got an ability to live free from the system, so that's where like solar panels might have some part to play, or batteries or the rest. But yeah, if you can power yourself and feed yourself and, pardon me, and house yourself, that is going to give you a level of independence that I think will serve you so well as the economy tanks, the recession hits, government control ramps up. If you can just bunker down and weather the storm, you'll probably come out the other side thriving. Whereas those that rely on welfare payments, those that don't have any food or water autonomy, they're going to struggle. And I don't want to see that, but the reality is that we are all responsible for our own life. And if you've chosen to give up that responsibility to the government, sadly, I don't think that's going to be a long-term benefit to one's lifestyle.
Yeah, it's that that personal sovereignty and responsibility and being able to take that. And I mean, how, just sort of getting to the end here, because I know it's getting late. I know you probably get to get up early.
Yes.
But I mean, any idea how close we could be to some catastrophe or recession, or what are your feelings?
Without having a crystal ball, I've jokingly made comments on social media about climate lockdowns happening in 2026. I hope that joke doesn't turn into reality. But as we've seen with COVID lockdowns, it doesn't take much fear being generated for people to willingly accept incursions into their individual liberty. I have run some polls on social media to get a gauge of where people are at, whether they voluntarily complied or begrudgingly complied, and whether or not that they would comply again in the future. And the responses to that show me that a lot of people would question it stronger should something like that come around again in the future. So I'm hopeful that whatever does happen, whether it's financial or liberty-based incursions by government, will have a greater degree of pushback by the general community next time. Whether or not that's going to be sufficient to stem the control, we'll have to wait and see. But as I talked to you about before, the situation might have, like, I thought COVID was enough to wake everyone up to government control. It was not. But hopefully the critical mass grows, and all I can do is be there talking about government control and individual liberty, and whether it's through this space or a whole bunch of others, and plant the seed so that people choose to do their own research, own reading, and work out that, maybe deferring to other people making decisions for my life is not a great idea. But it all comes down to couch and donuts or reading books and going to the gym. One is easy,
Yeah.
one is hard, one is hard, one is easy. Depends on whether you're
Yep.
looking at short term or long term. And I'd much rather work on the long term benefits at a short term personal cost, because I think that just sets up the foundation for a better society further down the track.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, I mean, it's like the digital ID, right? I mean, I keep noticing that more and more popping up, and I mean that's one thing we have to resist, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I need to qualify this that a government imposed digital ID is one thing different to a digital ID created by a private company that an individual voluntarily accepts to participate in that environment. But generally, when we talk about digital ID, it is that government imposed digital ID that can be linked to banks and corporations, so that your ability to function in society would be heavily restricted should you, like me, be critical of the government.
Yep. Yeah. It's all this centralized control, right? That's what we have to be aware of. That's what we have to resist, so that, yeah, because otherwise, yep, we end up in all sorts of problems, especially if they, like you say, introduce some climate emergency or further lockdowns. But as you say, if we're self-sufficient, we've got our own money, we've got our own power, food, then we can resist it,
Yes.
and be
Yeah.
sovereign individual. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so strong in opposing government control, where a lot of people are like, oh, it's not too bad. Because, one, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. And two, we here in the Surf Coast are about 30, 40 kilometres away from Corio Bay. But what if I pose to you that, Lachie, I can make you drown in Corio Bay? Your initial response to me is like, what? That is stupid. But if I encroach into your personal space, make you a little bit uncomfortable, you take a step left, I move, take a step right, I move, take a step back. You make those incursions into someone's liberty small enough, infrequent enough that it doesn't raise suspicion. You can make that person step back 30, 40 kilometres and drown in a water spot that they are nowhere near. So, yeah, and that's why I try to encourage others that wherever they see injustice, wherever they see incursions on liberty, speak up, push back, because if we don't push back when it's easy, when we've had all of our guns taken, when we've had all of our money taken, when we've had all of our houses taken, then we've got no ability to push back. So right now, while we're living in what seems to be a high degree of freedom in society, we need to push back where those restrictions pop up.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. All right, we'll start to wrap it up. How about if you had, let's say, one message for the Bitcoiners in Australia, what would it be?
I am not a financial advisor, but I don't think you can go wrong buying up more Bitcoin, because as the fiat currency tanks, that growth in Bitcoin value is only going to grow. And like, as we've seen, like, if you bought 10 years ago, you'd be in let's do the math. So if $20 was $5,000, if you bought $200,000 in 2015,
Oh, Jesus.
like you put half the value of your house into Bitcoin in 2015. Like, you'd be a multi-squillionaire.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I have clients who I work with, who wanting to learn about Bitcoin and buy Bitcoin, and they're always, often they say, oh, well, you were around for the good days, but
The
for
good days
me
are yet
getting
to
in
come.
now, That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think a bit of a prediction I've kind of put together is over the next 10 years, and there's definitely, it's not just me who's made this, who put this calculation together, but it's the team. And, if we look at, the global wealth increasing, and if we look at Bitcoin as a percentage of global wealth, it's currently only about, it's under 1%. It's like
Yeah.
0.2% of global wealth is Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
Bitcoin's been growing. So the next 10 years, global wealth could grow by about 6%, which could put global wealth up to nearly almost 2 quadrillion. So we're almost at 1 quadrillion now globally,
Yep.
which is 1,000 trillion. So if Bitcoin just increases by a modest, say, 30% per year, which is like a compound annual growth rate,
Yeah.
we could see in 10 years, we could see $2.5 million Bitcoin, because that would be like around about a $53 trillion market cap. So, and that's pretty conservative, because over the past 10 years, the growth has been significantly higher. But there's easily another 100x in this over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And of course, not financial advice, but
Yeah.
that's my little rough back of the napkin workings out. So,
But if you snooze, you
um,
lose.
yeah, that's right. And yeah, look, once it clicked for me, which really was around about the time Trump first got into power,
Yep.
and because I realized, because I wasn't that clued up on the macro markets and how the world works and how money works, but I did think, oh, geez, Trump could stuff this up, because I didn't know much about Trump back then.
Yeah.
But and that's how I sort of dipped my toe in. But then I read the Bitcoin Standard, and that's what actually really clicked it for me. And then that was it. I was almost living on a Bitcoin Standard from then. But
Yeah. So
still,
did that impart the trust in the system by increasing your knowledge? Was that the key element?
Yep, absolutely. Understanding, well, for a start, I was understanding the money system and how money works, and
Yep.
what makes a good money, and then understanding how Bitcoin works and how it can't be stopped.
Yeah.
And it's incorruptible, and it can't be changed, immutable. Those qualities, yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
That's what it
Awesome.
was. Yeah. So, and I guess, and then of course the other thing we need to say is, for those Aussie Bitcoiners, is go to the Libertarian website, which
Absolutely.
is libertarians.org.au.
Correct.
Yep. And do what you can, whether it's volunteer or donate. Right.
Absolutely. Every little bit helps, because the reality is many hands make light work.
Yeah.
And we're currently sitting on just under 20,000 members. And if we could quadruple that, we get in line with the amount of membership that the Liberal Party has. And if we can get those numbers, then we can activate really strong campaigns and door knock and letterbox, and run those really solid grassroots movements, which the Greens and the Teals are really good at, and even Labor. And that's like, regardless of whatever your message is, if you can get your message in front of people's faces, you will succeed more than those that can't.
Yep. So, how many members do the Greens have, for example?
I think they'd probably be on the sort of 60,000 sort of level.
Yep.
Yeah, like Labor's got a heap, but Labor's got a system where a lot of trades through unions are compelled to sign up as members of the Labor Party to have their union membership in order to work. So they've got a sort of unfair advantage in that regard.
Yeah, right. So you've only got to do a 3x from here. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be a compounding effect where my personal belief is that everyone is libertarian in at least one, maybe more elements of their life. Bitcoiners, 100%, they're libertarian in their view on financial freedom. And if they're a Bitcoiner that wants to participate in recreational cannabis use, or they want to run a business and not have reinvested profits taxed, or if they want their fuel not indexed with the fuel excise tax, like, then they might be more libertarian than what they originally knew. And thank you for this ability to talk about it, because the more conversations we can have, the more people we reach, and then the more people that jump on board, and it'll just be a compounding effect that while we do struggle against the major parties that have big numbers of people helping and big numbers of financial resources, once that snowball starts rolling down the hill, we're going to pick up steam and momentum, and I think we'll be going very well in years to come.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad we could do this too, because I mean, and we'll get this. I've got the team behind Edge21. They're gonna put this on YouTube, and they'll create a bunch of shorts out of it and put all pretty, TikTok pictures and all that sort of stuff on it. So get it out there to communicate the best way we can. But yeah, like I think with the Libertarian Party, I mean, I'm currently not a member, but I'm definitely going to dive in and check it out because I mean, for me, like it just seems like a natural way to live, and I think obviously me being a Bitcoiner, it just resonates with me the most. So
yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and hey, I know Melissa just did. She said she did the math on your $20. With
Was it
Bitcoin,
about
would
right?
be worth 93 million now.
Oh.
So that, what was it? If it was 200,000, wasn't it?
So let's say someone mortgaged half of their house in 2015.
Yeah.
They'd now nearly be $100 million. Oh wow!
Yeah.
I don't want to know that.
That's 10 years ago, right? Yeah. So all right. So if you had 200,000 now to put into Bitcoin, then I mean, I think that we're going to see diminishing returns, but that is going to be worth a lot more. Yeah. So and the reason being because well, if you keep that in your Aussie dollars, it's just going to debase away. It's going to just be worth less and less and less. But obviously with Bitcoin, it's a cap supply and growing in adoption and and use. So there's only one way for it. It either goes to zero or it just keeps growing to infinity, basically. So
pretty much.
Yeah. Melissa said that was for 250K. Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to share before you go, or?
For those of you looking at this picture here, those pictures were taken by a friend of mine, and I was taking pictures from the other side. So wearing a big camera that was activated by my mouth, flying over the skydive formation. We take photos so that then those photos could be used in the verification that Australian records were being made. So,
yeah, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. You're going to have to show me that sometime.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. All right, cool. Thanks so much for joining, Paul.
Thanks, Lachie.